Lee, try as they might, delusional Democrats just can't seem to get Trump. He keeps on winning. How are you tonight, Lee?
Let me, yeah, right. I'm very good, Jason. I'm doing great, actually. So let's include in delusional Democrats the leading Democrat, who of course is Nikki Haley.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, did you see that fucking ad she did? I don't.
I didn't
I'll
see
just
it.
no. It's the best ad for Biden I've seen so far this cycle, but I don't think it's. I said this earlier on my Twitter timeline. The great thing about Nikki Haley saying she's not going to quit is Nikki Haley, who is evil. I'll say that. Uh, she would get us all killed. I mean it. She's a warmonger who has no objection to sending other people into battle, right? And that includes her husband, who she needs to get rid of so she can get with other guys. But
You're right. I mean, it's true. But Lee, right
but
before we started the show, she was going to
I'm
give a
sorry, I didn't
speech.
I didn't finish
Oh, sorry.
that thought. One second.
Yeah,
The great thing about her continuing to run is she's destroying herself in the Republican Party.
yeah,
I mean, at this point, she is the enemy. I mean, right,
I
right,
think
or
so. No
yeah.
way she's going to be part of the Trump cabinet or anything like that. I mean, but who cares? She's just proven she's totally unqualified, totally incompetent. I mean, when she's at the UN, she could just like sit there drinking coffee or do whatever they do, sit around with the name tags. But she's stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, but she's a shill, very clearly a shill. One thing she did as the head of the UN, uh, that I noticed, she brought a delegation to the Holocaust Museum, and the Holocaust Museum was not doing his exhibit on the Holocaust. They're doing an exhibit on Syria, and of course, because I went to Lebanon in 2013, I know a lot about Syria, and she was blatantly lying, and so she's a tool of the Zionist deep state. That's almost a redundancy, but she is very consistent on the Zionist deep state end. And look, why would somebody become a Zionist deep stater? Answer: it pays very well. That's
I
where the
think
money
when
is.
I think when you take the globalist cabal and classify it as a Zionist deep state, it polarizes a bit and perhaps I know what you're saying, and I think
Well,
we agree that Zionism and Nazism and globalism are all part of a construct intended to control everyone, but I
well,
think it
well,
lands wrong on certain
let me go back
listeners'
and talk about a little
ears.
bit of history.
Mhm.
Okay, uh, Israel believes in Jesus. Do you know that?
Well, he was born in Jerusalem, wasn't
Not Jesus Christ, Jesus Angleton, uh,
he? Right.
James Jesus Angleton. Angleton was one of the founders of the CIA, basically a very early guy in the CIA. And when he died, they put up two monuments to him in Israel. Now, Angleton was not Jewish, so why is he there? He's there because, and by the way, Angleton was a big disinfo guy on JFK.
Isn't he so weird lookingly?
Angleton, yeah, I will say this: Angleton is fascinating. He's a very interesting guy. For one thing, like his history is the way to find out about Angleton is there's a great book by Jeff Morley called The Ghost. That was
I got
Angleton's.
it at your recommendation. Listened to it on my road trip.
And what'd you think? It's
It's
great, right?
it's incredible. I mean, he's a super weirdo. He's an evil CIA guy. And look, I think he was in Lord of the Rings.
No, and I gotta say, he's a very interesting guy. For instance, this, you've heard the book, but he's an expert fly fisherman.
Yeah.
Just take that. And he raised orchids. So he's a botanist who raised orchids. Uh, and that's just the kind of detail that they put in a movie. So,
But didn't he
but
also kind
Angleton,
of hate his heritage because it was Jesus and he wanted to change his name and
right?
everything?
Yeah, I call him Jesus. It's actually Jesus. His mom was Mexican. That's
Right.
why Jesus. But a lot of people call him. Uh, have you seen? Might be harder to find. By the way, Jason, I want to thank you so much. We did Andre Telezenko interview the other day, and a friend
Yeah.
of mine saw it and thought it was great, and I thought it was great, and I think you did too, right?
Yes, I did. It's always interesting to talk to Andre, firsthand testimony.
So I pointed out one of the things that you do. I want to give you absolute credit, Jason. It's way below your pay grade, but you're very good at finding clips when I say them. Like if I were trying to pull up stuff for Angleton, I talk and then I look down, right? I spent a minute and a half doing that. And so thank you for all the work you do on the show. And just again, it's below your pay grade because I think you're a great researcher. But
Thank you.
thank you so much for pulling up those things. So
Thank you.
go to C-SPAN and try to do a search. Find the archives of their videos and do a search for Ben Bradley. Bradley is with two E's. Ben Bradley from the Washington Post, and look up. Let me think. Do Ben Bradley Meyer, as in Mary Pinchot Meyer, because a fascinating thing about
Inside the
Angleton.
Beltway? Is that it?
It's an interview with him. I
You got
can't
this
see.
Life Inside the Beltway in 2000, Sally Quinn.
Yeah, that could be. It looks like that. But Ben Bradley, of course, was the published editor of the Washington Post during Watergate, which is another thing. But his sister-in-law was Mary Pinchot Meyer. Now, Mary Pinchot Meyer was JFK's mistress. JFK knew her in school, in prep school. And then they lost track of each other. And she was married to Cord Meyer. Now, Cord Meyer was one of the early CIA people. He was the head of Mockingbird, basically. So her husband, by the way, was Cord Meyer. So Mary divorced Cord Meyer and then got reacquainted with JFK. You can find pictures of them. Mary Meyer is a fascinating person. And we know that we know for a fact that they were having an affair because, and like I say, not just a sexual affair. Kennedy would do that, but he was in love with her. How do we know that? You can find this pretty easily. If you do a search for Mary Pinchot Meyer letters, JFK, a number of letters that JFK wrote to Mary Meyer, right, were found after his death. So she was killed a year after JFK died. It was assassinated. And by the way, E. Howard Hunt said that one of the people involved in the Kennedy assassination was Cord Meyer, because apparently Cord didn't like JFK being with an ex-wife.
Yeah.
That's again, Hunt said it, not me. That I'm just repeating what he said. So when she died, she had a diary. Okay. Now that diary would contain stuff about JFK, right? And so Bradley knew about it, and Bradley lived near Mary Pinchot Meyer. So he went over to her house to get the diary. Now, by the way, why is a journalist? Look, I'll put it like this. If you're a journalist and your sister-in-law, who was with Kennedy, is murdered a year after Kennedy's death, that's a news story, right?
I would think. But also, isn't that whole interview, Lee, he's giving like a very detailed, kind of awkward explanation of it that is almost such an obvious tell that it's like, what the hell are you telling us all this for?
Well, I think he's telling it because I actually think he's telling it because it's true, one, and because he doesn't realize what he's saying. Look, I'll put it like this. That thing about Ben Bradley, editor of the Washington Post, going to his dead sister-in-law's house, trying to find the diary. Now, when he goes in the house, who should be there? But you can guess.
Cord Meyer.
James Angleton.
Oh, sorry. Right.
So picture that.
Close.
When he goes in the house, he sees James Angleton in the house.
Yeah.
Looking for the diary.
Sketch.
Yes. And Bradley found it. He didn't do a story about it. He didn't tell the police. He gave it to.
Right. This is all the weird stuff I remember. He's telling us this incredible story, and it's like, wait a minute. What?
Well, because That's independent cooperation. I think because it happened. I mean,
Yeah.
but this story is one of the most fascinating stories ever, I think. So Angleton, that's who that guy is. So if I say he's part of the deep state and this cabal about Kennedy, can I say that? Agreed?
Yeah.
So one of the things that Angleton was responsible for, and the reason Israel loved him, is Israel, uh, they don't admit this even to this day. Israel's got nuclear weapons. Okay. Where did they get the nuke, the fissionable material for those weapons?
I
Answer:
remember it did have something to do with the JFK assassination and stealing it from the U.S. somehow or something, right?
it wasn't, they didn't steal it exactly, but there's a company, I think in Pennsylvania, that was making the fissionable material for nukes. And they weren't supposed to export to any country. Okay. But that material ended up in Israel. And that's what they used to make their nukes. And Angleton was behind it. It's conjectured. I mean, there's not receipts for that.
Right.
They didn't write
If they
on the
didn't
map.
hire Hunter Biden, he would take pictures of it and smoke crack with it.
Yeah. And so, uh, again, so if I'm talking Zionist, Israel Zionism, and deep state, all the other stuff I've talked about, historically, they've been part of the deep state since at least the 60s. And
I don't
look,
deny any of that. I just think that I mean, again, my opinion is Zionism, Nazism, globalism, all of these things are part of what you're talking about. And that
yes.
by just calling it Zionist, whatever the term that you use there, I think certain viewers hear that and think that you're focusing it on one thing when, because Lee, isn't it also true? What you're describing is proof of this. You just said Angleton was not Jewish, but he's helping Israel. And
Right.
we look at other things like why did the United States of America allow Ford and Standard Oil to continue to conduct business with the Nazis during World War II? If Standard Oil had stopped selling oil to the Nazis, the Luftwaffe would have been grounded, but they let it continue. So there's all this evidence that both sides are being fueled by something, even today, sending money to Iran and Hamas and also to Israel.
Well, and the Zionist part, look at Nikki Haley's position on Israel and look at her going to the Holocaust Museum. I think the Holocaust Museum is part of the deep state network broadly. They use the Holocaust Museum. And my friend, Rabbi Shapiro, talks about that all around the country, he look, when people see like an exhibit on the Holocaust, they may think, well, sure, that was bad. I don't like Nazis. Doesn't seem weird. But Yaakov Sharoz pointed out that they used the Holocaust, Zionists use the Holocaust in order to push their agenda, you know. So the Zionism part is very important. And also, given the fact that AIPAC is such a huge force in DC, I think it's important to call her a Zionist. And again, not because she's Jewish,
Right.
And people, like when I say Zionist, some people might hear, okay, Jewish. I don't mean that.
That's what
Dick
I mean.
Cheney,
People don't understand what you mean, which is why it's good we're fleshing it out in this conversation.
right? And I think anyone who's concerned about the deep state has to understand the real danger of Zionism.
And let me ask you something, though, Lee. The very point that we're trying to clarify right now, do you agree that it's a psychological warfare component of what we're talking about? The very nature of the argument is so triggering to both sides that it's difficult to even get to this level of detail to try to explain what you mean before somebody else goes harebrained crazy, right?
It's triggering to some people, but I'll say this. I think people are getting smarter about this stuff.
Better,
I'm
yes.
seeing it. I'm seeing it. People are, and let me talk about one aspect of Nikki Haley related to people getting smarter. Now, this is my experience. Maybe you have a different experience, Jason, but I'll tell you what happened when I would tell people who are on the right, Republicans, who are friends of mine. Like, let's say I've been to CPAC a bunch. I'm not there this year, obviously, but I've been to CPAC a bunch of times. So in the past few years, when I've been at CPAC and people found out that I was working for Sputnik, okay, people would kind of lean in close and whisper, say, well, you know what? I kind of I like Putin. Have you seen that ever? Because
uh,
I work for Russia, so I would hear it a lot, actually.
yeah, no, I haven't seen that. I, see idiots on Twitter saying like, "Oh, you love Putin," and it's always somebody who's got a Ukraine flag, and like, "Oh, so you want to send more money until everybody in Ukraine is dead?" Genius.
And look, that argument is the equivalent of saying, if you criticize Israel, you're anti-Semitic. It's the
Right.
same thing. It's like if you point out facts, you're therefore racist or anti-Semitic, or it's the same thing. It's the
If
same
you
argument.
even made an observation along the lines of, Putin sat there and gave a 30-minute explanation of the history of Russia, you might disagree with his interpretation of the history or the facts, but it was almost like a college level lecture, and Joe Biden can't speak for 5 minutes without saying 50 dumb things.
Well, and Nikki Haley is look at her rhetoric about Putin. She's saying actively that he wants to attack Poland and the Baltics and our country. She's saying Putin wants to. Did you hear anything in the Tucker interview where you think Putin wants to attack the U.S.?
Certainly not. And I don't even think it would be possible. Putin is quite pragmatic and has stated his purpose for the past 20 years. He wants Russia to become a modern economy and to trade with European and Western nations and have democracy and peace and prosperity in Russia. It seems like a reasonable goal for the president of a country to have, and everything that he's done for 20 years has been consistent with that. So this stuff they're saying about him wanting to it's just not the way Russia operates. Frankly, it's the way the United States operates, and it's exactly what Wesley Clark said we were going to do when he gave that speech saying, 7 countries in 5 years or whatever he said.
And this ties into the topic of the show, which is Democrat denialism. The Democrats right now, they're very dangerous. And the reason why I think they're dangerous is they're so in denial, they don't understand that everything they're doing is backfiring. They don't seem to be backing off. Like the verdict against Trump for now like 400 million with interest. Okay. That verdict, how did that work out for Trump?
Yeah.
Forget the money, but in terms of popularity, did people stop?
Everybody knows it's ridiculous. People
Right.
feel bad for Trump, even if you know what? We're already seeing it because that guy Dennis O'Leary. Oh no, this is even better. Jeb Bush put out a letter saying, "Hey, wait a minute. I know it's Donald Trump, but you can't do this." And I mean, who hates Donald Trump more than Jeb Bush? Maybe Al Walid bin Talal. But then you also had Kevin O'Leary saying, "Look, forget about Trump. You've just basically destroyed New York for business," and he's right.
Yeah. And Grant Cardone, who's an author and real estate entrepreneur, also have just talked about that. Look, the one thing both O'Leary and Cardone said, I'm a big Cardone fan, by the way. His book, The 10X Rule, is a great book. But they both said, look, when you go to a loan, when you go to, a bank for a loan, okay, and you own property, you are going to say it's worth the most you think it's worth, right? Makes sense. But the bank doesn't take your word for it, Jason. Not you, but anyone.
No, anybody, right?
They have independent appraisers. So their independent appraisers did appraisals and then decided to loan Trump money. So there was no fraud. Like if I offer to sell you like my iPad,
Right.
okay,
And you say it's worth 800 and I say I'll give you 400 and we settle on 6. This is negotiating. We have different interpretations of the value of it.
and if I say that this is worth 800, and you look it up on eBay and you said, well, it's selling for 600. I see that people, is that fraud? Did I
Call the
just commit
cops.
fraud?
No, of course not.
Right. Now, if I lied to you, that's different, and said, no, everyone's selling it for 800 on eBay, and you found that out. But again,
I got a better example for you, Lee. Imagine
yeah,
this. Let's say you created some amazing cartoon character and then you had the iPad that Lee Stranahan created, whatever, Sonic the Hedgehog on, and every other iPad like that is worth 800, but this one is worth 80,000 to the biggest fan of whatever that cartoon is. And so how do you ever know what the value is? Just the very fact that Donald Trump owns a building, like Joe Biden's 1967 Corvette, I guarantee to someone is the most valuable 1967 Corvette in the world.
Well, Jason, funny you should say that, because this very camera, this DSLR, this is SL2. And the reason I got this is because you've seen us like a 7D or 5D, right?
Yeah,
Great cameras, but they're very big. They're bulky.
Yep.
So when I wanted to take pictures on protests, Black Lives Matter or Occupy Wall Street, I got this SL2. It's very small. It takes great pictures. It's like a DSLR, but it's smaller. So I can put it in, if I had a hoodie, which I often wear when I'm covering protests, so I look like one of them. Make sense?
Right. Yeah.
This fits in the front pocket of a hoodie. I'm selling this very camera on eBay right now, Jason. I think the auction ends tomorrow. So this very camera used to take countless pictures of Black Lives Matter things. People can buy this from me, this very camera, used in my reporting, because you know, my kids need to eat.
How do they find that on eBay, Lee?
If they, I'll post it again on my Twitter.
On Twitter,
my ex profile. Yeah,
Twitter will be good.
So, I posted it yesterday, but
yeah, Lee, let's take a break here in a minute, because we're going to come back on patreon.com/Stranahan and also on Odyssey.com and Substack and all the Crowdsource the Truth channels. But we're going to have our sponsor exclusive segment coming up in just a few minutes. There's still a ton to discuss. Nikki Haley, what I was trying to tell you before is, just before we went on, she was supposed to give some kind of speech, but everybody was just sort of waiting for her. And when I put it on, they were just like dancing around to some Queen song, but she lost. So I don't know what the hell is going on over there in South Carolina, but we'll be back in just a few minutes. Join us on the sponsor exclusive segment. Thanks to everybody who sponsors the show. Thanks to you, Lee. We'll be back.
By the way, everyone, please sponsor me on Patreon. If you have not done so already, I want to pimp that too, Jason.
Absolutely. So, please join us for the sponsor exclusive segment on patreon.com/Stranahan. You can go there and sponsor Lee. All the sponsor exclusive shows of High Dive are on there, and it's a great way to keep Lee going. He's also got the Stranahan stream on Twitter, so you can watch that during the week. And we will